Have you ever walked into a place you built with your own hands, only to be treated like a stranger? Or worse, like a nuisance? Would you keep quiet and let yourself be pushed aside? Or would you let the world see who you really are? On an unremarkable Tuesday, Dr. Naomi Sinclair, founder and CEO of Vanguard Trust Bank, strode into the marble-floored lobby of her flagship branch. Her posture was effortless, her clothes bespoke, her presence the type that only comes from decades of fighting for every inch of respect. But none of that mattered to the young branch manager, Evan Lambert, sitting behind his desk like a gatekeeper to a kingdom he did not own. Naomi paused by the tall glass windows, letting the afternoon sun catch the silver in her hair. The bank bustled with customers, professionals in tailored suits, retirees cashing checks, a few college kids opening their first accounts. But as she approached the counter, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Heads turned. A hush fell, as if everyone sensed something was about to happen, but nobody could name it yet. Evan didn't even look up at first. He just saw the skin color, the silhouette, and made his decision before Naomi opened her mouth. "Excuse me, ma'am. This isn't the customer service line. May I help you with something?" Naomi smiled politely. "I'm here to meet with your management team. It's important." He sighed, exasperated. "Ma'am, we don't take meetings without appointments. If you have a complaint, I can direct you to our feedback form online. Otherwise, please step aside. There are customers waiting." The words echoed across the lobby. A few customers exchanged glances. One or two pulled out phones, sensing a confrontation. Among them was Jasmine Lee, a local activist live streaming her errands. She pressed record, and the red dot glowed quietly in her hand. Naomi, never raising her voice, slid her leather briefcase onto the counter, unzipped it, and produced a crisp card. "Here's my identification." Evan barely glanced at it before waving it away. "Look, people try all sorts of tricks to get attention in this city. We're not the kind of branch to fall for stories. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Security was already on the move. Tommy Rivera, a broad-shouldered guard with 15 years on the job, stopped beside Naomi, but hesitated. Something about her didn't fit the usual pattern. She didn't look lost, angry, or desperate. She looked patient. Naomi's voice was measured. "I'd like to speak to someone in authority. That's all." Evan's eyes narrowed. "You're speaking to the branch manager. I'm the authority here, and you're disrupting business." His words, cold and practiced, were meant to put her in her place. Instead, they carried across the lobby. Jasmine's live stream picked up every syllable. Comments flooded in, angry and incredulous. "Is this real? He's talking to her like she's a criminal. Does he even know who she is?" But Evan only saw a problem to remove. "Security, please escort this woman out. If she resists, call the police." Tommy looked to Naomi, waiting for her reaction. Naomi didn't blink. She pulled out her phone, pressed a number on speed dial, and said quietly, "Initiate Protocol 7, Vanguard Trust Downtown Branch." The effect was immediate. Evan tried to bluff confidence. "Who did you just call? Your lawyer?" Naomi met his eyes, cool and unafraid. "Someone who can clarify my presence here." By now, customers were openly filming. The tension in the lobby was electric. Something bigger than a customer dispute was brewing. Jasmine's viewer count leapt from 800 to 7,000 in 3 minutes. Tommy stepped closer to Evan. "Maybe we should just check her ID, boss." But Evan shook his head, determined not to back down in front of an audience. "She's stalling. She's making a scene. Outside. Now." Naomi stood her ground. She watched the grand clock above the tellers, her expression almost serene. "You have about 90 seconds before this becomes a much larger issue for you." Evan snorted, but the bravado was slipping. The security team shifted uneasily. Suddenly, the heavy glass doors at the entrance swung open. 3 people in dark suits strode in, a woman and 2 men, exuding an unmistakable aura of corporate authority. The woman, Carmen Walters, was the regional VP, known throughout the bank for her directness and lack of patience for mistakes. Carmen's gaze swept the lobby and landed on Naomi. Her face went from confusion to horror in a second flat. "Doctor? Sinclair?" Carmen blurted, her voice almost cracking. The effect was instant. Silence crashed down. Evan stared at Naomi in disbelief. "Doctor?" Sinclair? He repeated, voice barely a whisper. Naomi nodded, finally introducing herself out loud to the entire lobby. Yes, and it seems there's something seriously wrong with how we treat guests here. The cell phone cameras panned wildly. Jasmine gasped. The comments exploded. No way, that's the CEO? He's done. Carmen rushed forward, apologizing breathlessly. I'm so sorry, Doctor. Sinclair, we weren't expecting... Naomi held up a hand, silencing her. No apologies yet. Let's handle this in the boardroom. Evan's face was a mask of shock and growing dread. He barely managed to follow as Carmen, Naomi, and half the lobby's attention swept through the marble halls and into the executive elevator. In those silent, tense moments as the elevator rose toward the top floor, Naomi's mind was not on revenge, but on responsibility. How many times had this happened? Not just to her, but to customers, to employees, to anyone who didn't look the part. She knew what she had to do. The doors opened to the boardroom, where the fate of the bank, and perhaps the fate of Evan's career, would be decided. Naomi stepped out, her steps measured, the entire morning's humiliation fueling a resolve as hard as steel. No one, not even Evan, would ever underestimate her again. Have you ever watched someone's confidence drain away, second by second, as they realize everything they thought they knew was about to collapse? What would you do if the next 60 minutes decided not just your job, but the entire future of an institution? The doors to the boardroom at Vanguard Trust Bank's 42nd floor opened with a soft chime, but the air inside was already charged. Naomi Sinclair stepped in first, every inch the CEO, with Carmen Walters trailing a step behind. Evan Lambert entered last. His former bravado vanished, replaced by an anxious sweat that betrayed his understanding. He had crossed an invisible line, and everyone in the building was about to find out. 12 board members sat around the polished mahogany table, murmuring to each other, heads turning as Naomi entered. At the head of the table, Robert Sterling, the bank's chairman and Naomi's longtime mentor, rose to greet her, confusion clouding his sharp blue eyes. Naomi, what's going on? Carmen said it was urgent. Naomi didn't waste a second. She slid her phone across the table, streaming the viral video already racking up hundreds of thousands of views online. Jasmine Lee's voice narrated, "Y'all, the branch manager is kicking out a black woman in a suit. Wait, she's not backing down. Hold up, is that security? This is wild." Sterling listened, his jaw tightening as Evan's voice cut through the boardroom speakers. "This is a private institution. People like you don't belong here." Around the table, faces went pale. Whispers flickered. Was this real? Was that really Evan? Naomi let the video play, unblinking. Only when Carmen's arrival shifted the energy did she pause the footage. She stood tall, facing every board member in the eye. "This is not just a PR crisis," Naomi began, her tone steady but ice cold. "This is a cultural crisis, and today it nearly destroyed everything we've built." For a long moment no one spoke. Then Sterling found his voice. "Evan, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Evan's mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Finally, voice trembling, he stammered, "I didn't know who she was. She didn't identify herself. I was just following..." Naomi cut in, sharp as a scalpel. "Following what, Mr. Lambert? Instinct or assumption?" He glanced down, unable to meet her gaze. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Naomi echoed, letting the word linger. "Or a pattern." A heavy silence settled. Board member after board member shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Carmen, usually composed, could only nod along. The truth was too obvious, too recent, too viral to deny. Sterling cleared his throat. "Naomi, what do you want us to do?" Naomi looked around, reading each face. "I want accountability, not just from one manager who made the mistake on camera, but from an entire system that allowed him to believe he could get away with it. Today it was me. Tomorrow it could be any customer who doesn't fit his idea of who belongs here." A chorus of agreement murmured through the room. The numbers were already ugly. Twitter trending, Instagram stories multiplying. Local news vans lining up outside the building. Jasmine's video was being dissected on morning radio. "This is a nightmare," one board member whispered, running a hand through his hair. Naomi pressed on. I'm proposing a full review of our customer service protocols, mandatory bias and empathy training, real-time monitoring of in-branch interactions, and an anonymous reporting system for staff and clients. The world is watching. They won't accept apologies. They'll only believe action. Sterling nodded, recognizing the resolve in Naomi's voice. The same resolve that built Vanguard Trust from nothing. You have my support, he said quietly. One by one, the other board members nodded, shamefaced but determined. Only then did Naomi turn to Evan, her eyes softening only a fraction. You have a choice, Mr. Lambert. You can resign now and allow this institution to move forward, or you can force a termination for cause, which will become public knowledge by the end of the day. Evan's shoulders slumped, his entire career, reputation, and pride all shattered by a single hour of arrogance. He nodded. I'll resign. A wave of tension broke in the room. The air shifted. Naomi gave a single nod, not of victory, but of sorrowful necessity. She turned to the board, her voice rising with conviction. This is about more than one man. This is about who we choose to be, when the world is watching and when it isn't. She turned to Carmen. Prepare a statement for the press, transparent, direct, and unapologetic about our failures. Announce the new protocol. Let them know that this institution will become a model for justice and accountability. Carmen's voice was steady again. Yes, Dr. Sinclair. The meeting adjourned, but no one rushed for the door. Instead, as Naomi collected her things, board members lined up to shake her hand, murmur apologies, pledge their commitment to change. Only Evan lingered at the edge of the room, face red and hollow. He tried to speak, an apology, maybe, or a plea, but Naomi simply met his gaze and said quietly, Growth is painful. Don't waste this lesson. As she walked out of the boardroom, Jasmine's phone still in hand, the world was already changing. Customers in the lobby were buzzing. Social media was aflame. Even the employees who had watched, uncertain from the sidelines, now looked at Naomi Sinclair with a new respect. She hadn't just reclaimed her space, she'd thrown open the doors for everyone who ever doubted their own worth. Outside, the city went on, cars passing, pedestrians hurrying. But inside Vanguard Trust, a silent revolution had begun. No one, no customer, no employee, no stranger, would ever be made to feel small again. Not while Naomi Sinclair was in charge. How far can one moment of injustice ripple? Can a single act of prejudice, caught on camera, witnessed by the world, be transformed into a legacy of change? 6 weeks had passed since the viral incident that shook Vanguard Trust Bank from its marble foundations. The building, once a fortress of silent judgments, was now the epicenter of a movement. It began quietly with a press conference on the steps of the bank's headquarters. Naomi Sinclair, elegant in a silver suit, stood before a crowd of reporters, employees, and community leaders. The city's skyline loomed behind her, but all eyes were on the woman who had turned public humiliation into a blueprint for justice. Her voice carried with measured force. Real change begins not in anger, but in accountability. Today, Vanguard Trust commits to building a culture where dignity is not negotiable, and where no one is ever told, you don't belong here. Not in this bank, not in this city, not in this country. The reforms Naomi had designed, once dismissed as too radical by conservative board members, were already becoming the new standard. Every employee, from tellers to top executives, underwent intensive empathy and bias training. Anonymous reporting tools were launched, not only for staff, but for every client and visitor. Interactions in every branch were monitored for fairness, with regular audits and strict zero-tolerance policies. But the most profound change was invisible. It was in the way people looked at one another. Maria Gonzalez, once an assistant manager at a suburban branch, was promoted to lead the flagship downtown location. On her first day, she gathered the staff for a morning huddle in the very spot where Naomi had been humiliated weeks before. Every customer who walks through those doors deserves to be treated like they own the place, Maria said, her voice ringing clear. Because you never know. Maybe they do. And even if they don't, respect costs us nothing and gives us everything. The team nodded, many still remembering the tense afternoon when the world saw their bank's true face. Tommy Rivera, now head of security training, was the first to embrace the new policies. "I used to think my job was to remove trouble. Now I know. It's to protect everyone's dignity," he said, becoming a quiet legend among new hires. In the months that followed, the results were undeniable. Customer satisfaction soared. Complaints of discrimination dropped by over 70%. New accounts opened by minority-owned businesses doubled. Community leaders, once wary of the bank's elitist image, now brought their business and their trust. But perhaps the most unexpected change was in Jasmine Lee, the activist whose livestream had triggered the viral storm. She accepted a role as the bank's community outreach director, using her voice and her story to build bridges where walls had once stood. Vanguard Trust was soon profiled on national news. "Banking while Black and Turning the Tables," read the headline on the cover of Forbes. Naomi Sinclair's phone rang daily with requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and advice from CEOs across the country. Some were eager to change. Others were terrified of becoming the next viral cautionary tale. Naomi handled each call with grace, but her focus was always on the work. In every meeting, she reminded her team, "This is not about PR. This is about people. And if we forget that, we've learned nothing." The changes rippled far beyond the bank's walls. Three of Vanguard Trust's largest competitors announced new diversity and anti-bias initiatives, directly citing the Sinclair Protocol. Regulators began drafting stricter industry guidelines based on the reforms. Community organizations invited Naomi to co-create programs for financial literacy and minority entrepreneurship. Applications to work at Vanguard Trust, especially from women and people of color, tripled in less than a year. And Evan Lambert, after weeks of silence and shame, he published a public apology, admitting his failings and acknowledging his unconscious bias. He enrolled in a diversity leadership program and later spoke at a staff training event, sharing how a single afternoon had forced him to confront everything he thought he knew about leadership and respect. "It's not enough to say sorry," he told a room full of employees. "We have to do better every day. That's the only apology that matters." The one-year anniversary of the incident became a celebration. The once intimidating marble lobby was filled with laughter, music, and stories. A mural painted by a local artist now stretched across the entrance. "No door is closed to those who build it." Naomi stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching employees, customers, and community partners come together. Jasmine live-streamed the festivities, now with a badge reading "Community Relations" pinned to her blouse. At the end of the ceremony, Maria called Naomi to the front. The applause was thunderous. Naomi spoke softly, but every word cut through the noise. "1 year ago, I was told, right here, that I didn't belong. Today I see a room full of people who know that belonging is not a privilege, but a right. You proved that a single act of courage can transform not just a company, but an entire community. That's what real leadership looks like. That's what real change feels like." And with that, the cameras clicked, and the story was carried far and wide. Not as a scandal, but as a lesson. Somewhere, a young girl watched the video and dared to imagine herself not just walking into any room, but owning it. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not retribution, but revolution. And in the city beyond the bank's doors, life continued as usual. But inside Vanguard Trust, and inside everyone who had witnessed the power of dignity, nothing would ever be the same.